Okay, we're going to start. We're going to talk today about all the bad news. What happens when you're when you're dealing with a bankruptcy situation, and why bankruptcy actually's got a pretty bad rap that it doesn't necessarily deserve, and more to the point, how it can actually be used to help your client's long-term financial position. My name is Jay Fleischman. I'm a lawyer in New York as well as in California. I'm based in Southern California, but we represent people in both places. And I've got a fairly wide network of other attorneys who do what I do around the country. I'm also the host of the Student Loan Show. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. I hope you have. If you haven't, you should definitely check it out. So here are the big myths that surround bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is immoral. You're going to lose everything. Your boss is going to fire you. Your credit's going to be terrible forever. You're never going to be able to buy anything ever again. And everybody that you owe money to is still going to come and chase after you afterwards. None of these things can be further from the truth. But these are some of the things that we're taught from a very early age, and that's fed into us by the media over and over and over again from the time we're children all the way through adulthood. So what we see here is a number of indications to show just how expensive life has been becoming over the course of the past 30, 40 years for the average consumer. We've got tuition, school fees, and childcare going through the roof. We've got total mortgage debt going through the roof. You see it took a little bit of a dip in the 08 to 09 range, but after that, starting to go back up again. Vehicle loans through the roof. The cost of owning a vehicle has gone through the roof. Total revolving credit also through the roof. All these numbers are going up and up and up. Total student loans, $1.3 trillion. Unfortunately, at the same time, you've got the real median income average in the United States staying pretty much constant. In fact, as of 2005, the numbers have just about evened out to where we were in 1998. We gave up all of that time. Our numbers are on median, just about the same what the average household is bringing in spite of the fact that the cost of everything else has gone through the roof. So what does that mean? It means that people need to rely more and more on credit. And unfortunately, that feeds into a need for a release valve in our economy. With too much credit, not enough income, at some point, everything gets tapped out and you've got nothing left. And in order to be able to continue going on as a productive member of the society, you've got to have a release valve. That release valve is actually the bankruptcy laws. Bankruptcy is the misunderstood stepchild of the entire financial services universe. Bankruptcy is a federal law, set of federal laws, that is designed not for the benefit of one party over the other. It is a law premised in equity and fairness. It is designed to balance the difference between what I can afford to pay and what you want me to pay. You want me to pay everything right now, today, at 19% interest. I have $150 to pay you. That's what I've got. And so what bankruptcy does is it steps in between the person who owes money and the institution or the entity that they owe money to in order to facilitate that equity, that even distribution, so that everybody walks away not thrilled, but not destitute. Nobody's happy walking out of bankruptcy, but nobody's unhappy. It's the best of both worlds and the worst at the same time, because it tries its best to protect everybody's interest as opposed to one party over the other. So the first major myth that we step into is the fact that bankruptcy is immoral. People who file for bankruptcy are bad. Good people pay their debts, right? That's what we're taught to believe. And in fact, it's true because everybody wants to pay their debts. In doing this work for 21 years, I have never, ever had anybody come into me and say, I don't want to pay this money. Everybody wants to pay. It's just that some people can't afford to do so in their current financial position. Now, I can talk to you all day and night about the law, but look to the basis of all of our ethics. Look at the basis of everything that we do in our society that governs the difference between right and wrong. Look to the Bible. I'm not a big biblical scholar, but the Bible is the beginning of bankruptcy. It's the beginning of the notion of equity between people who owe money and the people who they owe the money to. In Deuteronomy, they start talking about the concept of the Jubilee year. At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release of debts. This is the form of the release. Every creditor who has lent anything to his neighbor shall release it. That is massive. Every 7 years, biblically, you would have the slate wiped clean. And the reason for it was because even in biblical times, they understood that sometimes bad things happen to really good people that's out of their control. Moving on to Proverbs, the rich rules over the poor, the borrower becomes the lender's slave, and if you have nothing with which to pay, why should he, your creditor, take your bed from you? If you owe money and you can't afford to pay it, nobody has the right to take the clothes off your back, the food off your plate, and the roof over your head. We deserve that basic level of human dignity. And it's littered everywhere else. So what the bankruptcy laws do is it tries its best to approximate that equity. Yes, there's division between church and state in our country, but that's what the law is designed to do right here. There are different types of laws. There's courts of law and there are courts of equity, equity being fairness. Bankruptcy is a court of fairness, a basic human dignity and basic consumer protection. So it's not immoral. Second myth is that everybody thinks that if you file for bankruptcy, you're going to walk out the other door and you're going to have nothing. You're going to have no home, you're going to have no clothes, you're going to have no belongings, you get stripped bare, and it's like Game of Thrones where they drag you down the street naked. It's not that way. And in fact, the bankruptcy laws allow you to make a decision on what sort of relief you're looking for. There are different sorts of protections that are available based upon your situation and what your long-term goals are. The most common relief is what's called Chapter 7 bankruptcy, straight bankruptcy. You walk in one door, you drop your bills at the door, you walk out the other door, you don't owe the money. You're not legally required to make payments for those debts. You have released your personal liability for repayment. In exchange, you get to keep certain things, but you don't get to keep everything. There's, again, that balance. You get to keep some stuff, but you don't get to keep everything. And different states have different rules and regulations regarding what you get to keep and what you don't get to keep. But for the most part, your retirement accounts, you always get to keep. Your household furnishings, to a certain level, you get to keep. Cars up to a certain level of equity, you get to keep. Homes with a certain level of equity, you get to keep. And in some states, there's something called an unlimited homestead exemption. Texas, Florida, and one or two others. It doesn't matter how big your house is. It doesn't matter how much it's worth. And it doesn't matter if it's paid off or it's mortgaged up to the hilt. You get to keep it. And that's because in those states, they put a high premium on the value of a place to live. Yeah. The workplace plans, it absolutely includes. The IRAs, the SEPs, the SIMPLES, the KEOs, the self-directed retirement plans, that's going to depend upon when you put the money in. And in most cases, you're going to be able to exempt or hold off to the side all of the money that you put in 2 years or more ago, and anything within the past 2 years, it's a little bit more limited. But the limitations that I've seen have been so much higher than most people are putting it anyway. What the law is really looking to do is to prevent people from front-loading all of their money into their retirement account and then walking into bankruptcy court. So, yeah. Yeah, sure. Sure. It is horrible advice. Well, because there's such an undercurrent in our society to pay the bills no matter what happens. And what ends up happening, a lot of my clients actually come to me after they've liquidated their 401s. They've robbed their future to pay for their past. And when you've got a 55-year-old person sitting in front of you who's done that, it's heartbreaking because they're never going to get that money back. And I tell people all the time, you know, you can't pay the rent with a paid-in-full bill from your credit card. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but it doesn't. Why don't they do it? I think that there's a lack of understanding and a lack of education on the financial services side. And really, that's the best approximation that I can come to it. Look, we've got a small enough crowd. I've got a colleague of mine in St. Louis who likens bankruptcy to a VD clinic. We're VD clinics. Nobody wants to talk about us. Anybody who's ever been to us never wants to think of us again. And it is the ultimate sense of failure and shame just because of the way that we're brought up. So we're brought up to look at bankruptcy as a personal failure and as a moral failure, and not necessarily as a financial issue. And so that's really the difference there. And for a lot of people who come into me who may have an asset that's going to be taken, your paid-in-full Tesla. I have a client who's got a paid-in-full Tesla. He would lose it. He made a lot of money until 2 years ago, and then not so much anymore. The option there is, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because we've talked about it. But the option there is a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. It's a personal reorganization. It allows you to take the money that you owe, bundle it together, turn that money over to court supervision, and allow you to repay that money out of the income that you have over a 3 to 5 year period, again under court supervision. I tell people that it's kind of like a really big and formal debt consolidation plan. The difference being that in a Chapter 13, it's not voluntary on the part of the creditor. The creditor is required to accept that which is sent over to them over the period of 3 to 5 years. And there is some limitation on what the person who's filing for bankruptcy can do during that time. Can't take out new debt. If they get a massive increase in their salary, they need to report that, and they may need to turn that over. Their tax refunds, in many places, they need to turn over. But it's useful also for the person who has fallen into arrears on a secured debt, on a car loan or on a mortgage, and they want to keep that property. They get to pay that arrears back through the court system. Also, past due taxes, very handy for that, because it allows you to repay those past due taxes with no additional interest. If you've ever owed taxes, you know that the interest and the penalties are what kill you. It's not the principal that you owe. Through Chapter 13, you pay what you owe as of the date that your case goes into court. So you get to save that money on the additional interest and penalties. People think that they're going to lose their job. They're not going to lose their job, and not only do I say it, but the law says that you can't be fired for filing for bankruptcy. Just can't be fired. And in fact, for many years, I used to get clients from the HR department of Goldman Sachs, and they would send me people who had applied for jobs and who would otherwise get the job, but for the fact that they had terrible credit, they owed a lot of money, and they just needed to wipe the slate clean. And from an employer's perspective, you want to think of it this way. If you hire somebody and they owe a lot of money and they're not servicing that debt in the way that they should be, they're more likely to dip into the kitty. They're more likely to steal. I'm not saying that they will, but desperate people sometimes do desperate things. And so from a security perspective, an employer is less likely to have a problem hiring somebody who's been through bankruptcy, especially in banking, insurance, investments, even McDonald's, somebody who's going to stand in front of a cash register all day. They're less likely to steal. Everybody thinks that it's going to kill their credit. They're never going to get anything. Their credit score is going to be terrible for the rest of their lives. And like it or not, a credit score means a lot. I'm not a big believer in a credit score, but you need a good credit score to operate in our society. Well, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in 2015 actually did a study, and they looked at people who filed for bankruptcy versus people who went through a period of insolvency, paid off their debt over some period of time, and they tracked their new credit worthiness and their ability to get new credit over time. And so they looked at 4 quarters, 1 year after filing for bankruptcy, and you'll see that the blue line is the people who filed for bankruptcy and came out the other side. And the red line is the people who were insolvent, struggled their way to pay the debt off fully, and then 1 year later what their ability to get new credit was after they were zero balance due. And you'll see the remarkable difference. So in spite of the fact that we've been trained to believe that bankruptcy is going to kill your credit score, for those who are insolvent, for those who are unable to make the payments on their debts in an appropriate fashion, bankruptcy can actually go a long way towards making things better. I've taken a screenshot from Experian because nobody believes me when I tell them that bankruptcy doesn't stay on your credit report forever, so the screenshot from Experian will take it directly from the horse's mouth. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy remains on your credit report for 10 years from the filing date, and a Chapter 13 is 7 years from the filing date. If you're in Chapter 13 bankruptcy and repaying your debt over 5 years, you only have 2 years left as reporting. Now, compare and contrast that to the debt that goes past due and goes into collections. How long does that stay on? 7.5 years. Not that much different from a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And in fact, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy is going to come off sooner than that other delinquent debt. So clearly, somebody who files for bankruptcy is in a position to obtain all of these things on cash or on credit later on. It really depends upon what they do post-bankruptcy. Everything in credit reporting comes down to, it's like the old Eddie Murphy routine. What have you done for me lately? That's what this all comes down to. So if you've gone through bankruptcy and you come out the other side and you've used this as an opportunity to change your financial outlook, to change the way that you budget, to change the way that you handle money and understand money, you're going to be in a position that's far better even a year down the road, as opposed to if you just continue on a bad road, things are going to continue to get worse. People think you can't have any money after bankruptcy. That's also incorrect. Everything you do after your case is filed with a court is a completely different universe. If you know anything about taxes and taking a short year election where you end your fiscal year before December 31st, it's the same thing. There's a line in the sand. There is a pre-bankruptcy you and there is a post-bankruptcy you, which is a completely different person, physically looks the same, has the same social security number, same date of birth, same friends, but is financially a different animal. Anything you do after bankruptcy is yours and yours to keep. 3 things that people are concerned about when they go into the process or are considering the process is first and foremost student loans. This is a subject that's near and dear to me, and everybody thinks that you can't do anything about student loans in bankruptcy. Never going to happen, no way, no how, and that's what a lot of what we read talks about. The reality is that it's not the case. There are limitations, and there are things that you need to prove in order to be able to get your student loans discharged in a bankruptcy. You've got to prove 3 things. And this is a standard that has existed since 1987, when the laws were different and when the overall amount of student debt was different. And in fact, this case, and the woman's last name is Brunner, so that's why it's called the Brunner Standard, came out of New York State, came out of the Second Circuit. The judge that decided the case, off the record, has indicated that he made a mistake. It was a bad deal. This case involved a woman who came out of school, filed for bankruptcy, and 4.5 years later tried to wipe out her student loans at a time when she could have wiped out her student loans after 5 years of repayment. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Bless you. She was a hog. She couldn't wait the additional 6 months, and so she ruined the pool for everybody since then. Thank you to her. You need to prove 3 things according to this standard that's been adopted everywhere except for one very small sliver of the center of the country. 1, based upon your current financial situation, you cannot maintain a minimal standard of living for yourself and your dependents based on your current income and expenses. Most people are going to fit into that situation. I can't afford to make the payments. Additional circumstances exist indicating that this state of affairs is likely to persist essentially forever. Things are never going to change. Now, who's going to fit into that situation? Nobody who's able-bodied is going to fit into that situation. Nobody who's young enough is going to fit in that situation. Pretty much anybody under the age of 55 is going to be blowing out that. They're never going to meet it. Older people, sick people, people who are caring for special needs children or special needs family members, they're going to fit in that situation because their financial universe is such that it's never going to change. This is the way that it's going to be. I can't go back to work full time because I'm taking care of my special needs child. They're always going to need me. I'm never going back to work full time because I'm a parent first. And your third standard is you've done everything that you could to repay the loans. What that means is you've done everything humanly possible to maximize your income and minimize your expenses. Different courts look at that in different ways. Maximizing your income doesn't only mean that you're looking for a better job in your town. It doesn't mean that you're looking for a better job in your state. It could very well mean that you're looking for a better job anywhere in the country. I'm an astrophysicist. I can't get a job in Southern California. I don't want to go to Northern California. I don't really like it very much. Doesn't matter. Is there another job that you can make more money doing that's within your skill set? Have you cut all of your expenses? Have you done everything that you can to minimize your expenses? Cut out the cell phone, cut out the McDonald's. Somebody was actually, within the past couple of weeks, denied the ability to wipe out their student loans in a bankruptcy because they went to McDonald's. Amazing, isn't it? Wiping out tax debts is easier. The return must have been due more than 3 years prior to the filing. Due date is always April 15th, unless that's a Sunday. Must have been filed. A final filing must have been done more than 2 years before the filing. And if there's been an assessment, that assessment has to be more than 240 days old. 3-2-240. If you fit into that category, you can actually wipe out your personal income tax debts. Amazing. The only two places where it doesn't exist is that pink sliver in the center of the country and the Northeast, which those courts have determined that a late filing of your taxes doesn't count as a filing. If that filing was done late, doesn't count. And late, by the way, means after the extension date. So if you've gotten an extension to the October 15th date, you're still good. It's just that if you file 2 years later, you're out of luck. Foreclosures. Bankruptcy stops a foreclosure from moving forward and allows you to catch up the past due balance. So all of your people who are past due on their mortgages just need a little bit of time. This is the process that's going to do that for them. Same with your cars. Yep, well, I already exploded the car. Same with your cars. If you're past due on the car note and you're looking to keep that repo guy away, the bankruptcy is going to do that too. And, ultimately, this guy hates bankruptcy. Filed for bankruptcy in '87. No idea. Dave Ramsey, who I take issue with a lot of what he says, but one thing that he says that rings really true to me is that bankruptcy may seem like an easy way out of a bad situation, but it can't fix behavior problems. And what that really means is if you're going to look at this process as the ability to start over, to wipe the slate clean, and to use it as a chance to learn new rules for handling your money and fix the bad behaviors that got you into the place where you were even at risk of doing this, then it's a valuable thing. People go on to do great things after filing for bankruptcy, but it requires them to make the change. It's a change in mindset, it's a change in behavior, it's a change in education. And I think that if they do this, this is an enormous opportunity for planning for the future. It gives the ability to do great things for people. They can adopt better budgeting and money management skills that they didn't have before. Could free up money for long-term investing and planning for their retirement so that this way they're not broke when they're 70 years old. opens opportunities for higher education without necessarily taking out such large student loans because you've got better cash flow. Psychologically, I mean, what does owing money do to the family unit? It's amazing to see people come into me who were happy. Their families were very happy. And then debt happened. And the husband and wife are fighting. And the kids aren't happy. And the parents are fighting with the kids. And everybody's short and anxious with one another. It reduces that strain and it makes life better. Yeah, it's not perfect. But for the right person in the right situation, it can be a viable option for restarting their financial lives. It's not for everybody, but it's not the boogeyman. It's not the end of the world. And that's the message that I want to leave you with.